Welcome back to Fish's Call Sheet, where we celebrate the amazing people who make production possible. Today, I'm so excited to share, we really have, from the beginning all the way through the process of what you see on television, someone who creates, someone who writes and really forms projects. So a special guest, welcome to Fish's Call Sheet, Danny Zuker. Welcome.
Oh my God, thank you, Michael Fishman. Little Michael Fishman. I mean, we met when you were but a child.
Yeah, I was little and innocent.
Yeah, you were little and innocent, and now you're big and innocent.
Well, let's hope. I try to keep some of that childlike wonder, some of my innocence about me.
Yeah.
So I kind of have laid out the formation of, you are a writer and you have done your words pretty much everybody has heard at some point, and whether they realize or not. You've had this amazing career.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd love to walk through kind of that process. Now you're a producer.
Uh-huh.
What would you say your official title is?
Right now, I'm unemployed. But I will come in on a show. Like if I'm creating a show, like if one of my pilots gets picked up, I'd be an executive producer on that show. But I could come in at a show as a co-executive producer or number two, or a consulting producer. Let's say I was only going to do a couple of weeks on a show because I was part of something where I was working on a couple different shows at a time. So I was there just to be sort of to help guide a project. In that case, I might be a consulting producer. And these are all just levels of writers. You know, when we talk about, I think what you think of in a movie is like what a director does in a movie. Writers, the producers of television shows, we do that for television. Not that we don't have directors, but the writers call the shots more in television. The directors call the shots in film. I think that's why television's better. But yeah, so when you hear these titles, whether it's like co-producer or story editor, these are just rankings of writers. This is like levels of seniority in writers. And as you get up, more is expected of you. When you start to get up into the producer levels and supervising producer and co-exec, and obviously you're not expected just to write in those scenarios. We want to know that you can run a writer's room. We want to know that you can solve problems on the stage, that you can edit, that you can be counted on to go to casting. You want to have a larger sense of the process, because mostly when you're starting writing, you're in a writer's room, you're fixing scripts, you're coming up with stories. And, when you're young, the big thing that's expected of you, because you haven't had the experience, is just, I want you to have some good jokes. We're stuck here on a rewrite. We need a joke here. And, I certainly, build a reputation at that, solve little problems, have a little perspective, and then more and more becomes expected of you. So
now take us back to the beginning. What was the point that you knew you wanted to work in this business, or that you had an idea that writing was your thing?
I mean, I'd have to go back really far, because I more globally, comedy was my thing. I kind of knew, I was one of those kids who just, the minute I made somebody laugh, which was early on in my life, I could not believe the joy I had, and the way it sort of the attention I got from others, and in a family where maybe dad didn't pay so much attention to me, it was like, oh, well, good, I could be funny. I wasn't a particularly athletic kid. I know that might shock everybody looking at me right now, but I didn't need to be. I could just kind of make jokes and meet girls that way, and always liked making adults laugh. Anyway, when I was about 6 or 7, I was raised fairly agnostic. I had no awareness of my Jewishness till I was like 11 or 12. We had a Christmas tree. I didn't know. But that said, the most Jewish thing about me was my mother's father was a bartender in the Catskills at a Catskill hotel. That's was the Borscht Belt, where all the old comedians would go through. I was up there one summer, and this flashy guy with wide collars, I even remember his name was Van Harris. And he was just everything you think about of a late 60s, early 70s, lounge comic. But he was telling me jokes and cracking me up, and I made him laugh. And he told me that he was a comedian. And I was like, what's that? It's well, I get paid to make people laugh. And I was like, whoa. It was I didn't even entertain that as a possibility. And once I heard that there was a career in creating comedy, I never went. I was all I wanted to do. Like I was very lucky that it was like, I was very lucky in that I was not somebody who had to make a late in life decision. Oh, this is what I was only going to do this from the time I was a child. And so my life would have could have been incredibly unhappy had it not worked out, or unhappy now in different ways as it is. So I always wanted to do that. And, as I went through college, I would make some sketches and do, as part of a sketch team. And we did had a little TV show there. And I wrote a bunch of things, and I thought like, oh, I'm one of the funnier guys at Syracuse. I'm going to just come here and set the world on fire. And Letterman's, I had a meeting with Letterman, didn't hire me. I had a meeting with Saturday Night Live, didn't hire me. I was pretty like stuck, and that was disappointing. But through a convoluted way, I wound up getting to work as a PA for Howard Stern this is like in 1987. I'm just out of school. He was going to do a late night talk show, and they never aired, but it was super fun. And I was a PA for that, and became friends with all those guys. And when that didn't air, and there was another producer on that show who said, "Hey, I'm doing a show out in LA. If you want to PA out there, you can come out." And I did. That show was a show. It was trying to be like the Daily Show before the Daily Show, except it wasn't funny and it was horribly produced. And it was something called the Wilton North Report. And I came out there. And that was the end of '87, and in the end, it was disastrous. But there were amazing people who were associated with. Conan O'Brien was one of the writers. Greg Daniels was one of the writers. Nell Scovell was one of the writers. And, there were all these people there. And so I made a bunch of connections there when that went down. And then there was a writer's strike. And I had the best tan of my life. I was broke. And I was living in Southern California for the first time. And then I wound up getting hired on Arsenio Hall was doing a late night talk show, and I got basically a PA job on that. And that show took off. It was like, and after 13 weeks, the writers had 13-week contracts. Arsenio got rid of about half the writers. It wasn't a fit for him. And that was on a Friday, and that night. So then on like that weekend on a typewriter, this is how long ago it was, I typed up like topical jokes. I worked all weekend just typing up topical jokes and had like 4 pages of jokes, which I brought in on Monday and handed to a couple of the writers who were there, who thought I was funny and were one of the friends. And out of that 4 pages of jokes, Arsenio picked one of mine and did it on Monday in the Monday monologue. And then on Tuesday, he wound up picking 2. And on Thursday, he had picked a whole bunch of my jokes. And on Friday, I was hired as a writer.
Awesome.
And that was when I that was at least when I knew like, oh, I can like do this. I can write jokes on command, topical. And I stayed in late night and variety for a number of years. Every step of your career, though, you're always thinking, can I do this? So I got my first sitcom job, real sitcom job. I wrote a couple spec scripts. And my first real sitcom job was on a show called Evening Shade for Reynolds last. I came in as a story editor, which is a low level, but I found, oh, I can do this. And not only can I do it, I can do it quickly. Like I was able to write a script really fast and people seemed to like me. And, so that led to Roseanne, where I met you. And then, and so on. So that's a long answer, but yeah.
No, I love it. And I think it's so important for people to hear and also that you were willing to take the risk, the chance to pitch the jokes, right? Because so many people keep the jokes in their pockets. It's the first step is you got to be willing to put it out there and know that not everybody's going to like every joke you pitch, and to be daring.
You got to pick your spots. You got to and really read the room. I mean, it is, it's like doing a lot of listening. It's like I'll tell you just from experience of running a room that if we are all stuck on a joke and it's 11 at night and we're trying to rewrite something or a thing that doesn't work, I personally don't care where the idea comes from. Like, the cleaning crew can come in, or the Sparklets water guy can come in, and if they say something funny, it's in. And so you want to be, as somebody, let's say you're a writer's assistant or something like that, you gotta take your shot. And it may not work, but that's how you find out.
Yeah, be ready. Be ready in the moment. I always remember growing up on Roseanne, that's one thing I think that happened quite a bit is if anybody had a good line or in the middle of doing something, if there was a problem and we were stuck, or especially if she didn't like something, whoever could come up with a good idea, the best idea won. And I think if you go that, I think you get the best work because you're not afraid of, as long as we don't make it too hierarchical.
Yeah, I agree.
Share.
It should be a meritocracy, and as you go. I mean, the danger for people starting out in this is, you know, there are the two things that can happen. One is and they're both dangerous. The never say anything rule, the be quiet and I'm just going to listen here, because that's a mistake and won't get you anywhere. No one will remember, and you'll have no chance to shine. The other mistake you can make is to not shut up, is to just be pitching over and over again. And it's like, and I've said to a number of people, pick your spots, hold on to it. If you have a great pitch, write it down, think about it for a second, you know, and is that the best it could be? And if it is, obviously take your shot. Well, you'll find out if it's not in sync, but always be listening to the room. Where's the room going? There's a vibe, you know, have we rejected several jokes in that area? And are you still pitching in that way? Or, you know, and
is it a topic that doesn't fit, or that people, could be a valid topic, but maybe a topic that people don't want to do or don't feel comfortable doing also?
That's exactly it. And some shows you can really tell, like there's certain shows where like current references are fun and they'll do them all the time. Like on a Murphy Brown rule, in a Murphy Brown room, everybody there was picking up topical, right? We'll do another joke about Tip O'Neill, you know? But if you're listening to a room where they're not doing a lot of topical references, it's not about that. It's a mistake to then pitch something, even if it's a good one. You know, don't try and reinvent the wheel when you're first coming in. Pitch good jokes within the idea, within the physics and reality of that room.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. I'd love to dive in with you about basically the starting process, because like I write, but for you, you have literally written from the ground up. And not a lot of people have done that in television. I mean, that's a small select group that people don't realize how small that group really is to have an idea, generate this idea, and then grow it to the point where you can sell it, and then to get it into production and get a pilot made, and then to get that pilot on the air. These are all kind of monumental steps.
Huge.
And so I know you've been writing recently.
Yeah.
Wrote a script that I know you were really excited about. Can you take us through that process of kind of figuring out what idea you want to start with, or starting that process and kind of writing that great pilot script?
Yeah. I mean, you know, part of the thing that's really hard is you don't have a ton of control over the results. So what you have to do is you just have to do the best you can. And it's hard. Like if you're going out to write a hit, that's really tough. You know, it just is. So for me, and, you know, I've had a couple pilots made. I've had a handful of pilots made. I've had a couple shows on the air, but I've never had the big, you know, Modern Family I didn't create. So I wasn't part of that giant hit. It's a very difficult process. For me, I'm just trying to think of like, what's a story I want to tell? Who are people? What's a character I like? What's something I want to say? And that it could be, you know, what are the dynamics of characters that I think I could see and tell a story over a period of time. Now, you know, in the golden age of sitcoms, you didn't need so much. No one was requiring like that. There's an arc of a season or a story. A lot of them were standalones, and if the show was on long enough, it would find its arcs, as like Friends did. Friends didn't start off with a lot of arcs, but then we had all of the Ross and Rachel stuff, and then that came in. And Roseanne didn't start as arcs right away either. But then you know, it's Dan loses his job, or Darlene's not talking to him, and then you carry a fight over several episodes. So for me, it's like it all starts with like, who are the characters I want to see if it's not serialized, or what's a story I haven't seen that would be fun to write, you know? And then if I get that, and where am I at, where I feel in my life, who are people I want to spend time with in my own crazy head? And that differs. I mean, sometimes you'll have like an idea that you really love, and it won't go away, and then you'll start writing that out and fleshing it out. Other times something may fall in your lap, and you might have an arranged marriage. I'll give you an example of something that I wrote that I really love recently. So I went with a new management company with Brillstein, and they were pitching me talent and ideas. And one of their pieces of talent was a guy I'd always adored was Kevin Nealon. And they just set up a lunch for us because Kevin has a YouTube show that's called Hiking with Kevin, where he goes on hikes with celebrities and hundreds. And it's like comedians in cars with coffee. I like it better though, because Kevin's so silly and funny as you go through it, and you really get it. They're just fun, and it's out in nature. And he had the idea that he wanted to do a show around that show, kind of a Curb Your Enthusiasm about a guy like at this point in his life and career where this is his job, but like what's it like in his family, his friends, and comedy. So to create, and Curb Your Enthusiasm, which I love, is a very like confrontational show. It's a show like Larry David is always looking for a fight. And what we thought was funny about Kevin is conflict averse. Mm-hmm. Like takes and so shit happens to him, but he doesn't want to cause a scene and has to, and that comes out in other ways. And so we had the idea that like we would do a real improv hike with a celebrity, like in the pilot we just wrote. We have one with Sarah Silverman, and then we have one with Rob Lowe. Those hikes will either launch, complicate, or resolve a story that's happening in his life. And Kevin and I wrote a pilot that I just love. Whenever I write a pilot, I'm really ambivalent about it, even things that turned out to be good. This one's just plain funny. And we did it for TBS, and all along the way, TBS loved it. All the people who couldn't greenlight it, apparently, but they had loved it, and we loved working with them. And then they ultimately were doing much more high concept stuff this year at TBS, and which was a real kick in the balls, frankly, because I never expect anything. But this one felt like a home run. First of all, it's for TBS. We're bringing A-list celebrities to them every single week, and it's funny. So that felt terrible. So for both of us, for Kevin and I, because Kevin's suffered these same defeats as I have. And so now we're out selling that to other places, and hopefully we get some interest in that. But, it was humbling because after 11 years on Modern Family and reaching a certain point, like I got out of practice with remembering the crushing disappointment that exists.
It's the nature of it. And it's so hard for people to understand, because it doesn't matter what level you get to in this business, you'll still have the setbacks, and there'll be these moments of frustration that you just can't really explain to most people, but they're just heartbreaking. It's funny too, when you write something that you know there's something there, right? And it checks a lot of the boxes, and you start getting, because you try to monitor your joy sometimes in this business. Like you're always trying to like kind of compartmentalize it a little bit and be like, okay, I'm going to be a little pragmatic here, and I'm going to protect my heart a little bit, and then fall in love with a story and things you're doing. And that's largely, you're on the right track. But then very much, I've had a very similar experiences. We went up all the levels at a network, and I'll leave their name out only because I may go back to them.
Howard, I'm kidding.
Fair enough.
I don't mean that.
You got a lot more writing than I have.
Yeah, no. I'm like this close to sort of blowing up my entire career. So you go.
But yeah, so I mean, same thing. Like you said, made it through the first level of executives, made it to the next group that was in love with it, sent it up to the parent company. Everybody was excited, all the way up to the point where it's like, oh, this is gonna happen, right?
Yes.
And you're so thrilled, and it's real that you've made it through enough levels that you can almost taste it, and you're starting to visualize.
Oh, you're casting. Yeah, absolutely. You're thinking about putting it together as staff. I understand completely.
And then the executive at the top says, we're looking to go a little slightly different way next year, or, it's really bold and we really like it, but we're not sure if we're ready.
I mean, that's what kills me. It's funny. It's like, it's very rare that like I'll do something and where they pass, where preceding it, I haven't heard about like, oh, we love it. And then it's just, there's a dishonesty about everybody that drives it. I'm from Jersey. That never happened there. It's like, you knew when someone didn't like it.
Yes, people just tell you. And I always laugh because they love it. 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 Oh, he didn't like it. I had a problem with it. Now I have a problem with it. Right? Like all the way down the line. Oh, there was this note.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm always like, I also sometimes say your courage and conviction is really remarkable.
Yeah.
I definitely feel that way. It's hard. What I try and remember, if you're in it for the long haul, and at least this has been the case for me, that every great thing that ever happened in my career, like every great show and opportunity or exciting or people I got to work with, it was always preceded by a crushing disappointment that let's say I'd gotten that thing that I wanted, I would never have gotten the opportunity. I was working on a show in New York, a cop show, first drama, loved it. It was with Noah Hawley called The Unusuals. And I was having a really fun time on it. And thought we're going to get a pickup, and we didn't get a pickup. And I was, now I'm going to go back to LA and I'm miserable. Had I gotten that, I would have missed out on Levitan and Lloyd calling me to say, hey, you want to try, we just did this pilot, Modern Family, and it's like, wow, like a show that changed my life. And every step of the way in my life, I've had those things. And so I am just praying I continue that streak one more time.
Well, I always tell people in this business, especially, but in life, like, a lot of times what you feel is rejection, or what is initially rejection, is a redirection, right? Like
that's a good way to put it. I think it's a really good way to put it. It is. It's a redirect. Yeah. And it's always turned out that way because we don't have the, we don't have that view from 20,000 feet when we're in it.
Yeah. I always tell people, if you read a script of your life, right, you'd skip certain scenes in certain portions of it, right? Or you go, man, act 2 is terrible for me, but that's okay because act 3 is coming, right? So like, if you just kind of keep your faith in it,
yeah,
you kind of have to manage that portion of it, though. But it doesn't make it easier when you're going through it.
It's so crazy. Like showbiz, like in general, it's like it is one of the more brutal, like emotional businesses in the world, and then on the other hand, which attracts some of the most brittle, fragile people to do it. So it's just like it is, it's not. Yeah, I mean, yes, of course, it's really hard on us because we're not, we're sensitive, most of us.
Well, and it's a community of artists trying to make art with all their talents, right?
I know, and I know it's not fun. It's just not fun.
And you get critiqued all the time. And this is one of the things I don't think people understand either, is especially when you work television, right? Like, as a writer in television, you're writing every day. And you're not just writing every day, you're writing moment to moment, scene to scene, moment to moment.
Of course, you're constantly reworking it, and you're constantly and you are listening to a lot of people weighing in. And often, there are people who not always, I don't take that, but often you're dealing with people whose opinions you probably don't respect. Like they're not that based on it. And that doesn't go for, there are some incredibly creative execs and smart people. And I do that, but frequently you are not dealing with them. You're dealing with the dum-dums. And it's really tricky because you cannot have a hit if you take every note the network gives you. That's a recipe for failure. It just won't be a hit.
I tell people standards and practices, right? They come to you and they say, we're not sure if you can say that, right?
Yeah.
You're making the rules. What do you mean you're not sure if we can say that? And if you say yes every time, then you have to cut out almost anything that is topical or really personal, because it's close to a line.
Yeah.
And we never get anywhere if we're not willing to take some bold steps. And so sometimes you have to say, well, we're going to try and say that, or I'll give you an alt, but this is what we want. And they turn out to be some of the best moments.
Of course, that's it. So yes, standards and practices in particular, I found, you really have to figure out where you're going to draw the line and go anywhere. The other side, and again, if you're on a hit show, you have a little more leeway than if you're on a starting show, and very few shows come out of the gate a hit. So you have to you have to weigh that. You also, though, in addition to not taking every note, if you ignore every note, you're done.
Yeah.
You're done. You've built no goodwill. So that is the balance. Like, where do you cave? Where do you manage? How do you handle it? What are the lines in the sand that you are going to draw? And it's really helpful, especially as a show creator, to have a point that is a walk away point for you. Like, to know that, like, I know going down this road is not going to be something I can deliver to you. in good conscience to me. It'll become something I'm not proud of. And if you have the ability to walk away, because walking away, there's a lot of power in walking away and not taking it if you can. It's hard though. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not proclaiming that that's easy, but because it isn't, it's hard, but
and in this business it's really hard because the delicate nature of what we do, because it doesn't matter how good your show is, every show ends, right? Like Modern Family was phenomenal.
Yeah.
But at some point it was going to come to an end, right? And then when you go to the next thing, to know where that line is, I talk about this as a writer. Like when I start a project, I kind of have a pretty clear idea of, like, especially early on, this is early as my writing career is, this is a project I really want to be committed to or be involved in. This is one I'll sell, or this is one I'm willing to really take a backseat on. But these elements are things that I'm willing to stand for, or this is a piece that I would be willing to walk away from. And as an actor, you have to know, are you willing to walk away at a certain point? If you're talking to people and you're communicating with people, and for me, that line, I'm down for whatever silly thing we're gonna do, but it comes down to something is, there is a level of morality, and there is a level of kind of just respect as far as professionally, that I think at a certain point, you get to a certain point in your career, you're like, I'll only put up with this much. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And you have to do that. I mean, it's like, you become, we've been on toxic, we've been in toxic sets where, and we've also been, and I think we've all had toxic relationships with certain networks or studios in various points, or standards and practices. And anything you can, it should start off in your house. If you can keep your set and your crew and that place be a place of respect, and obviously tempers flare here and there, but you can minimize that. Everybody's in it together. That's the best. I think that always comes from the top. That's just good show running. When you have a good showrunner, isn't afraid to tell, like, if somebody is stepping out of line, when actors say, hey, be cool, we're lucky to have these jobs, and not just give them everything they want. I'm tiptoeing around too much, so you get it.
Well, I was going to ask you, being a writer in a room, right? Take me back earlier in your career. What's one of the most fun rooms that you were in, and what makes a room magic versus a room that is kind of that struggle?
Wow. Yeah, and sometimes it has nothing to do with the show itself, in terms of the quality of the show. Sometimes it honestly depends. Okay, so a good writer's room for me is one where there is a benevolent dictatorship, whoever is running the room, meaning that we don't argue things, because writers have strong opinions, and we all do. And you want, if the person at the top, if you are that person at the top, to be fairly decisive. It's like, entertain something and it's okay if, like, that person doesn't like anything we're pitching, but then when you find something that they like, let's not debate it ad nauseum. That becomes like, you lose sight of what the comedy of it is, and the flow of it. So I think a good writer's room, of course, at the top, it starts with a good showrunner who can really hear. And the other thing about a good writer's room is a room where people can hear the flow of the room. So if you pitch something that's not quite working, then I can jump in and maybe make that joke a little better, and then somebody else can pop in and say, or we could do it this way. And then we have, like, there's a flow. It's like I mean, it's always pretentious when people talk about comedy, so I hate it, but there's like it's like a call and answer in jazz. It's like you're really listening to it, and you can tell when someone's not listening because they could stop the room dead with a pitch. Other thing that makes a really good room is if it's people who don't bring a room where you can feel okay about either pitching a dud. Say you pitch a dud, right. and then which we all do, and then when you're teased for it, good-naturedly, it doesn't destroy you. Like, right. you pitch, and then it doesn't work, and then we go back. So people who it's not about being funny. It's about having great senses of humor. You need to be like, and sometimes that's called having a thick skin.
Right.
I just think it's called having a good sense of humor. I've worked with writers. I had a writer once on a show this guy was really good. But if I didn't like his joke or if it didn't work for me, I found that I was spending a lot of my creative energy in that room coming up with ways to not hurt his feelings, as opposed to just saying, nah, I don't like that right now. It's not what we're looking. We'll move on. Good try. But he constantly needed repair. And that was exhausting.
Energy suck, right? Like it becomes, it doesn't matter how good you are. You're going to get jokes rejected.
Yeah.
And it's not even that the joke's bad. It doesn't fit here. It doesn't fit the moment. It doesn't fit what comes next. And is, maybe it's too big and takes us in a totally different direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And right, you're going to get rewritten. No one likes it. So say you've put in a draft and we know this, every draft is going to get rewritten. If you had like 40% of your first draft made it on the air on any of the good shows I've ever worked on, that would be epic. If it was like 40% of your draft, that would be like, that's an incredible amount of ownership. But you get ownership once. You get ownership when you go out and you write your first draft and then you bring it to the room and then it's no longer yours. I've definitely seen writers. It's never fun, by the way, especially when you think you've figured it out in a better way than the room is doing. And that happens all the time. And it's okay to say that. It's okay to say like, here's my thought process while I did that. But if that doesn't stop the room from pushing forward and rewriting it, let it go. Make a joke and let it go. Because I've seen too many people like sulk or get defensive. And the last thing you should do is like if you are feeling that way, is if you suddenly just get really quiet, you're not there to get quiet. Right. I still need you to pitch on things, so.
I always tell people you defeat your power of your own, right? Like if you have a great idea, it may circle back too, or someone may come back to you, especially if you generated an idea where you're going through a process and you get to, like I always tell people, don't blow up a project day one or before the project. Like I see people pick a fight with a network right after you get ready to sell it or in a room with an executive and all of a sudden they're like, no, my character will never say anything. I'm like, it's not 100% your character. Like, don't blow it up now. Wait till you're on set.
I agree. I've said this to writers too. I said like, okay, let's just say, for example, that this joke that we're cutting out of your master script is a great joke. Right. You will have another chance, I promise. Because if what we put in after the table read doesn't work, and on stage it hasn't worked, you will have the opportunity to say, hey, I don't really like this joke. I was in my first draft. Would it be worth? Can we try it? Right. And if you were right, it'll win. Right. But like the fight. But if you fight it every step of the way, no one's going to be inclined. It's human nature. I'm going to be inclined to say like, fuck that. I'll put anything other than that in.
Right. Well, and you've now created this animosity where you're not really listening and engaged, and people are not really going to be able to receive it because the way you're going to deliver it is like, mine was better, and you're like, okay, that is never the message that, even if you're right, it's not going to be received, especially if you're going up the food chain, right? Like, and that's one of those things I think people underestimate. They fight over stuff because I'm always like, if you got a great joke or a great line or a great moment, save it, because when we're on set, if it's not working, at that point, we're really looking for stuff. Or if somebody, standard and practices, somebody comes to us and says, okay, that joke doesn't go. Your joke may be the best one to fit in that spot because we have heard it and we do know it was safe. Maybe it wasn't exactly what we were looking for, but now we know in this scenario with time running and money burning and we don't have much time, you may get exactly what you were always hoping for.
Yeah. And yes, I also tell people, like I've told people this on Twitter too, who are like comics on Twitter with jokes and somebody stole my joke or they did a different version of this joke. And I always say to them, and I say this if you are like, people shouldn't steal your jokes. It's terrible and you should call them out. But if you're the kind of person who's talking about people stealing your jokes all the time, what that makes me think is that you don't write enough jokes. That like, if your joke, like you should be able to like, if that joke, a joke you didn't love or a joke you love didn't make it to the script, write a better one. Right. That's the best. If that didn't work, go and write a better one. If your jokes are precious, if you're making your jokes so precious to you, what that tells me is that they're rare for you. they're not, you know, they're not, it doesn't exude confidence. I've had jokes stolen and I've had great jokes taken out. And my attitude when I'm at my healthiest is, fuck you, I got more, you know, and that's it. And I think that's what I want from that. And yeah, and you know, honesty in the room is just a good thing. I want people who are hardworking, but all of those things. And frankly, it's just that sort of amalgam of people who make me laugh. Even when we're not, I love room bits. I think they lead to great writing. So I like people who can play. I like people who are.
And for people who don't know, like a room bit is, it may not, it has nothing to do with this show, right? It's just people come up with stuff in the moment or joke and tell stories and riff and play or go into a character, because when you've been in there for extended periods of time, the pressure is on. You need people who can release that pressure and make the place fun and safe again.
Yeah, exactly. And it often does lead to story. You know, you're it feels like you're goofing around, and then suddenly out of like 15 minutes of discussing utter bullshit, it was like, you know what would be funny though? What if so and so did that? And then, oh yeah, that would be good. And you know, and that, so yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for. And there's different, you know, people always ask what's it good to be in, like there's types in a writer's room. So there's, you know, and I've seen this with comedy writers. There's, I mean, I'll break it down broadly into two types, but there's two types of comedy writers. There's the extroverted comedy writer who you could imagine doing stand-up, or you can, I mean, it's just probably, you know, maybe has a bug of like a big personality and would be great like in public speaking and all of that. And then there's brilliant comedy writers who, if you were at a party with them, you would have no idea they were comedy writers. They're just quiet, but they are so brilliant on the page. And so those are where and you have to know who you are, where you fall in, and then deliver on those things. Ideally, it's good if you're like that brilliant on the page to occasionally, to not just to chime up in the room a little bit. No one's going to expect you to do a bit, but to pitch in the room a little bit in those moments, and not, that would be great. And ideally, I don't want somebody who's just, and I have had these before, who they're great and funny in the room, but when I get their draft, it's like, it's not a good draft. So you want to be all of it. You know, you want to be the whole package whenever you can.
Yeah, and I think you're always learning. I think that's the part for me, is to understand and learn from the people in the room with you, right? Like I watch certain people and I'm just amazed, and you try to watch the way that they think and the pattern in which they kind of, you know, I've watched Norm Macdonald, for example, do a stream of consciousness that works into something, but it's all his logic. And if that logic makes the next step and the next step and the next step, and I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of it that way.
Yeah.
So to try and steal some of that, right? Like I'm not stealing your jokes, but I'm going to steal that thought process of like trying to, how would someone like that shape it versus someone who is super extroverted?
Oh, totally. I mean, my favorite thing about the Modern Family room, which was a real room of heavy hitters, and we had so many people in that room that I learned from every day, like really learned from. Like when I would, like, they were asking questions about story in particular, on things that had never really occurred to me. And it got me to ask those questions. Yeah, I mean, there's too many, really all of them. I think it was great. Or we had, you know, and in addition to that, like people whose jokes were just so fucking good. And it was, what was the process? How do you keep that so fresh? So yeah, I mean, it's great to work in a room with people who dazzle you.
All right. What is the first thing you look for on a call sheet?
Lunch.
Yeah.
No.
That's the breather, right? And the
no, first thing I look for a call sheet on, really when I get a call sheet to go is what time. That's, I mean, that's like a 6 a.m. really. So that's a thing. I'm not sure I understand the question though, in terms of the first thing I look at on a call sheet. I want to look at call time and location for me.
All right. What's the one thing you never want to see on a call sheet?
I mean, I'm not happy about when anytime I see like 3 company moves like that because that means it's going to be a late day.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you know, I can tell what the hassles are. Really, it doesn't start with the call sheet though for me. When I want, because by the time I see the call sheet, I know I've written the script.
Right.
So I know what's probably has to be shot there. So I don't have like a huge amount of issues with anything. Like when I'm just looking at the call sheet, I'm like happy. I mean, like occasionally, if it wasn't the case on Modern Family, but if there's an actor I don't love a lot, it's like, oh, I'm going to be spending a lot of time with so-and-so today. That's maybe something I don't want to look at the call sheet.
Yeah. What is your favorite thing to see at craft services?
Oh my God. That's a good one. My favorite thing. I mean, I love when they do I love hot dog day. It's gonna sound crazy, but they sometimes they bring like one of those like old cart hot dog days. That was something I liked. I liked that when we would do when specialty catering sometimes, like when Roscoe's would come with fried chicken and waffles or something like that, like a specialty thing. That would be what I like. Yes.
Okay, now what do you hate to see at craft services?
Oh, I don't love seeing, I love sushi. I don't like seeing sushi. Catered sushi feels like gamble.
Feels like a roll of the dice, right? Like
I am just, yeah, I'm terrified of it. Yeah. So that's probably something I don't like to see there.
All right, after all these years, Danny,
Yes.
how do you define success?
Oh my God. For me, what I really believe and what I'm dealing with right now is success is, for me, is waking up in the morning and looking forward to doing something. Looking forward to the thing looking forward to create, being excited about something that I'm going to make, and being paid to do that. So to know that, and you can be successful financially, but dread that you're writing for so-and-so and so-and-so. I feel truly successful when I know that I have the opportunity to create something that makes me happy, that other people seem to like. That's, for me, what success is. Also, getting to work with good people, being able to turn down work because of quality of life. And I'd rather make something that I like with people I like that may not be hugely successful in the world than a giant hit with people I don't care about that much and stories I feel like I'm phoning in.
Yeah, I agree. So I always ask people, how are you doing based on your definition of success?
I think I'm doing okay. I mean, you caught me at a time when TBS just passed on my pilot. So,
Right.
No matter where you are in your business, you always feel like, oh God, I feel like a failure from that. So I emotionally don't feel, just in all candor, I don't feel fantastic about it right now.
Yeah, I think that's there, but there's a real, first of all, there's a real honesty and there's a real power in that I think is incredibly important for people to hear, because
I do too.
I mean, you and I are a bit of the abnormal from the standpoint of we've been in this business forever, right?
Yeah.
It's been, I'll speak for me, early, like late 80s, I've been in this business almost continuously. You're talking about over 3 decades, right? And you've been writing at the highest level, and Roseanne and all these shows, like you mentioned, starting with Arsenio Hall and working through late night, working through the biggest comedy shows, and then coming off of Modern Family and really steering in a lot of ways there. But then we move on, right? And that's, I think, the nature of the good-hearted artist, is like you're always looking for the next thing, and it's okay to feel kind of a little broken about things that don't work, or a little in between at times.
Yeah, I feel very uncertain about it. And it's funny because I was aware during Modern Family of how unusual it was, because, I got Modern Family in my 40s, and I had up until Modern Family, I'd never worked on anything for more than 2.5 years. And so what Modern Family was it was 11 years of not looking for a job. And even though I was out of practice with that kind of insecurity and that dance. I mean, I was trying to get launch projects during that and doing things here and there, but the actual like, oh fuck, not, I've done a couple of pilots, but I haven't worked in a year, and and have turned down certain things, and it's like, oh, the uncertainty is troubling, and I'll feel, and it's yeah. So you always, just taking stock of that. I am acknowledging though that it's not like, I think it's helpful for people to know that, like, there's always, if you care about what you're writing and if you care about the job, that, yeah, it's always going to be scary.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, because I think it motivates us, but it also, like, there's nothing better than getting to the point where you've worked somewhere and you're coming back the next year, or you have that thing. But at the same time, in this business, that there's a finite element.
Yeah, no, I mean,
right? And there's a creativity part of it. Is, yeah, you want to launch other projects. Yeah, you want to do other stuff. And I mean, you're amazingly talented. We both know that you will write.
Yeah.
But in these interim moments, it's a very normal, natural thing. And I think for people out in the world to hear it, I think is super powerful.
Yeah, well, thanks for saying that. I mean, it's it's interesting. I think, like, this doesn't also just go to show business. I think so many of us over 2020 had to, like, reset and are dealing with real uncertainty, and existential insecurity on so many things. And so, yeah, I mean, I just acknowledge we all feel this now.
Yeah.
So cool. But I've been double vaxxed, so I can now hug people.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing I always ask people is, what is the one thing you want on every set?
The one thing I want on every staff?
On every set.
Oh, on every...
Actually, but let's go to the first one. What's the one thing you want on every staff?
Oh, well, I want people, I honestly, it's just this. I want people who I am excited to see when I walk in on Monday. That I know are going to make me laugh, that are interesting, and that's what I want on every staff. And on every set, what's something I want to see? Yeah. Gosh, I get everything I want on every set. I sound so terrible, but what am I lacking? A close, lockable single toilet bathroom.
People don't realize how rare that is.
And I knew where they all were on the Fox lot. I could tell you where I could go and lock the door. I knew, like, what this theater had it, that theater had it. That's all I want.
Okay. Now, what's the one thing you never want to see on a set? One thing you eliminate.
Anybody from the Trump administration making a cameo.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Especially for the world who doesn't know, you've had an extensive back and forth with the former president, which I always found to be so amusing. And I'm always, my response was always, you're arguing with a guy who writes comedy for a living. You're going to get outwritten. Like, in a written form, this was never a good idea.
He would be outwritten by a third grader of average intelligence.
What's the best gift you've ever gotten from working on a project?
Oh, wow. The Emmys?
Hey, listen, that's a great one.
There have been so many great, like, are you talking about a show gift? Or, I mean, honestly, the best gift that I've gotten has been on Modern Family has been the travel. We went to Hawaii, went to Paris, it's like Australia. It was like, in comedy, you never get to do that. Like, that's the purview of, like, big budget 1 hour dramas. And so that just getting to do those things were so magnificent for me. So that's the best. Yeah.
Danny, how do you want the people who worked with you to remember you?
I don't know. I guess I'll ask what their eulogies will be. I want people to think, like, that that I was valuable. That's all. That was valuable, and I was a good guy, and I didn't make, that I was valuable and encouraging, and as weird as I was, fun to be around.
Well, it's funny. I think I met you. I think I was like,
you were like 9, right, or 5?
Yeah, I was pretty young. probably, I want to say 7 or 8.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
And you were always funny, and you were always definitely valuable. You were always someone that people depended on. And it's one of the reasons why when I was looking for someone to be the first writer on here, that's why I said to you, I reached out to you because you have this beautiful kind of tapestry of amazing experiences, but you also have remained focused and personable and humble, and keep your joy and your sarcasm and your playfulness all at the same time. You know, that's what I want in a room.
Oh, Fish. I feel like I'm going to get hit by a bus and they're going to play this on.
No, it's not the eulogy. You know, okay, I'll do better if I ever get called out.
Okay. Yeah, you're going to say something, but well, thanks, man. That's a really nice thing. And obviously, you know, you always worry about what's going to happen to kid actors. It's just a natural thing. It's a very unnatural state for a child to be in. And it's clearly like I mean, what a great dude you turned into, you know? So I feel the same way.
All right. So this is the last big question.
Okay.
What is the legacy that you want your family to take from your life?
I don't know. I just say, like, I think legacy is something I have no control over. I think, like, I don't like when I personally don't like when people do things to have a legacy. I mean, my legacy, if my children have a legacy, it's that they enter into healthy relationships, pursue stuff that makes them happy, and live, you know, fulfilled lives, and that if I've damaged them in a way that at least is different from the way I was damaged.
Yeah,
that's
I agree with you. I always think, you know, the legacy question is such a big one. I joke with my kids is we write our legacy every day, but it can't be because you want somebody else to take notice of it. It really is. It's the personal things that really make the biggest difference. And so I'm with you. Like, I don't want it to be, the acts I do are not designed for other people to acknowledge or to celebrate. They're meant for me to improve and for me to take where I started and try to give my kids better. And I agree with what you said. Hopefully I damaged mine in a way that was much less imposing than those that I received.
Yeah. And ultimately, like, you basically, when you walk through the world, and you never know this while you're in it, but some people do, but, like, is the world, like, worse off for having you in it or better off? Like, have you raised up some people or that you don't even know, but, like, behind you, it's like, oh, it was great that they met you because it helped them this way. Or were you like that person who was like, oh, did you harm people? Were you a hassle? Were you manageable? Like, did you make people worry too much? And it's like, that's what it is. And so, but you don't get to see that unless, you know, you figure in funerals. So hopefully we're the first one. But.
Yeah. I always tell people, you know, I try to pick people up as much as I can. I try to be collaborative. I love what we get to do. And I love this business. It's kind of where this came from. And I really work hard not to leave anyone in my wake, right? Like, I don't want anybody I don't want to leave a trail behind me that people don't want to cross. So I think it's a beautiful thing. Danny, I'm so thrilled that I got to share this with you, that you shared so many details. And
my pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, man, my pleasure. You're a good dude. I appreciate it.
If you liked what you saw, or maybe you want to know more about the entertainment industry, check out some of our other episodes where we dive into other departments as I celebrate all the amazing people who make production possible.